Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted you started our discussion about productivity, because at the end of the day, that is what we really have to not only grow and sustain, but we have to really identify what are going to be the drivers of productivity going forward in this time of profound turbulence, transition, and transformation. And in the United States, we had a great wave of productivity with the digital revolution, beginning of the 21st century. Our companies were very agile and quick in adapting the first wave of the digital transformation, coupled with the fact that we had a regulatory environment in the United States that both enabled and encouraged the adoption of that technology. But in recent years, as you mentioned, we've had also a decline in productivity, not anywhere on the scale and scope of Europe. Between 1996 and 2023, the Eurozone's productivity gap is about 3.2% greater than the US, and in the total EU, it's 2.2%. So that's a very significant gap in productivity. But how do we get to this new wave of productivity that's going to, one, deliver a higher standard of living, drive economic growth, and of course ensure a higher standard of living for our citizens, which is what competitiveness is all about. So, one of the things I want to share with everyone is, I love the title of our conference, but I'd like to just adjust the words a little bit. We're saying spiraling through the conflicts in search of opportunities. I would say it's spiraling through the transformations to seize the opportunities. Because we're living now in just an incredible opportunity-rich environment. These technological revolutions. We heard about yesterday AI at great depth, and that was a fantastic discussion. But it's way beyond that. It's this convergence of the digital, the biotech, the nanotech, the cognitive revolutions, and they're all converging and colliding, and they're creating unprecedented opportunities for new products, new services, new ways to live, and they're all dual use. This is very important. All of these productivity challenges, as well as having a huge economic impact on how we live and grow and develop value to our citizens, have huge implications for national security. So what are some of the issues? What are some of the things we need to do, both in the EU and Greece, the United States, to unleash the new wave of productivity? The first, I think, is to recognize that at the end of the day, it's the private sector enterprises that create growth. They create value. And government's responsibility is to shape this enabling environment for innovation and for competitiveness. And that starts really with reaching this right balance, Alistair, between regulation and unleashing innovation. In the US, I'm sure many in this room perhaps believe we're maybe not as strong on the regulatory side as you are in the EU, but we think that having a very flexible, tempered regulatory environment coupled to a flexible workforce enables our companies to pivot, to take new organizational structures, to really redesign their business practices in a way that they can seize these opportunities. So the regulatory environment, we heard this yesterday on the AI discussion, is, in my view, and I think others, too rigid and too controlling. And even on AI, having regulations this early to control that evolution of this game, it's just an exponential technology that we're dealing with, we think is too rigid. And the other thing I want to share on the regulatory environment and how it relates to productivity is that I was really kind of stunned yesterday to realize that in Europe, writ large, and particularly Greece, but we heard this, there is no production capacity for generic pharmaceuticals. And hearing that was shocking to me, because at the end of the day, you have to make things. You can't just be, working in software and services. You have to make things, and not to be able to make generic pharmaceuticals at scale today was kind of shocking to me. And what I learned was that so much of that was because of the regulatory environment. And then, of course, the other ingredient for unleashing productivity and the investment, and we'll talk more about this, is having what I would call an innovation-friendly capital and tax structure, ensuring that you can unleash private capital to invest in very risky ventures. So having a tax system that is not punitive, but also provides some incentives that are fair and transparent is also a foundational base that governments have a real responsibility to set. So one example of this, finally in the United States, it was actually in the Trump administration, we were able to get a territorial tax system so that we could repatriate profits without double taxation. So the productivity wave is going to be driven by these technologies. We have to have governments that are going to help create the environment, regulatory, tax, and we need, and I hope we'll talk about this, radical collaboration, new models, new partnerships, new alliances to build on the productivity opportunity. Seize the opportunity.